Good to have you back. Thanks for joining me again. We're in a study. We're on a journey, really, on a journey about leadership, specifically about being a leader worth following. Ultimately, leadership really doesn't have anything to do with job and title and report tos. It has to do with making a difference in people's lives. Any time that you and I are seeking to influence the thinking, the attitudes, the behavior, the growth, the development of another person, we are taking on the role of a leader. And that happens almost in every conversation and every encounter that you and I have on a day-by-day basis. We're really providing some kind of leadership, first to ourselves and then in the lives of others. In this study, a core leadership passage has been Psalm 78:72, which says, David shepherded them with integrity of heart, with skillful hands he led them. Why should anyone let you lead them? Why were people willing to follow David? And it was because he had authentic character, he had integrity of heart. We spent 2 sessions looking at authentic character. That's the core, fundamental component. Secondly, not just with integrity of heart, but with skillful hands. David was exceptionally competent. Character has to do with who you are. Exceptional competency has to address what you can do. Are you productive? Can you get results? People tend to follow folks that are talented and get things done. We're in the midst of looking at this third and final component, and that is David shepherded them. And that is the component of building meaningful relationships and connections with people. That's essential if we're going to have the privilege of investing in their lives. There's got to be a likability about us. Remember when Mark was describing how Jesus went about providing leadership. In Mark chapter 3, verse 14, it says that Jesus appointed the 12 to be with Him. And that pattern of being with Him can be traced in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, and it needs to be traced to today. If you and I are going to have the privilege of being leaders and people that are worth following, to make a difference in the lives of others, to add value, to better their lives, you and I need to establish meaningful relationships with them. Last time we began looking at 10 tips or suggestions on how to build more meaningful relationships. I'll review those in a minute, but I want to address something that I think is really apropos for our day, and that is the issue of social media and its impact on our capacity to build relationships. Now, you know what I'm talking about, social media. I'm talking about, our phones, the mobility of our phones, instant messaging, texting, Facebook, Twitter. All of those are the way that you and I communicate with people today. And it's growing, I read recently that teenagers do about 100 texts a day. I mean, that's 3,000 a month. You could probably say that when it comes to social media and all of the means related to social media, that our generation has never had a greater opportunity to be connected. And yet, we are probably the most socially, relationally disconnected generation in spite of all that. I mean, for instance, most of you got a phone. This is my phone, my iPhone, and you've got contacts in here. Any idea how many contacts you got in your phone? 100, 200, 300? It's probably a whole lot more than you think. I deleted about 100 last night. I have 847 contacts. I have a lot of contacts. But I wonder, how many folks in here, how many contacts in here could I call at 2 o'clock in the morning with a problem? Could I go through my contacts and could I find 8 names or 6 names of folks other than my family that could serve as pallbearers at my funeral? You see, we got a lot of contacts. Social media affords us that. But yet, how many meaningful relationships do we really have? Deep connections with people. It's critical to build in our lives. God created us for relationships. Last time we began to look at some tips in building meaningful relationships. let me quickly review the ones that we looked at last time with very little comment, and then we'll look at the rest of them in this session. Tip number one is be comfortable with who you are. It's hard to give yourself away. It's hard to establish meaningful relationships if you're not comfortable in your own skin. So get comfortable with who you are and who God has created you to be and what He's created you to do, and then feel a great sense of God-worth and self-worth in your life so you can give yourself away. Number two, unconditionally love those that you're privileged to influence. Don't prejudge, just unconditionally love people because they're a creation of God. Number three, look for every opportunity to use your influence for their good. Try to make their lives better first and foremost. Now let's pick up with new material in number four. Remain accessible, approachable, and accountable. Remain accessible, approachable, and accountable. Don't build a wall around yourself. I mean, be approachable, be available, be accessible. I mean, look at the life of Jesus. He was very much that way. I know that you and I are not Jesus, but we could probably all be more accessible, approachable, and accountable. See, what we need to realize is that when we are relating with people, they're always asking themselves these three questions. Number one, can I trust you? Can I trust you? Number two, do you really care for me first and foremost as a person? And then number three, are you for me, against me, or for yourself? Those three questions are circulating in the mind of just about any encounter in any relationship that you and I have. People want to know the answer to those questions. And when they conclude the right answer to those questions concerning us, then they're willing to allow the relationship to go to a deeper connection level where you and I can have a greater influence and a greater impact in their lives. So remain accessible, approachable, and accountable. Number five, remain authentic and transparent with others. Remain authentic and transparent with others. That goes a little bit back with being comfortable with yourself, being transparent in terms of who you are. Do people, especially those closest to you, people you live with and work with and closest friends, we make all sorts of assumptions that they know about our likes and our dislikes. Those are often not valid assumptions. And we go on really being annoyed by people and therefore holding back and building deeper relationships because of something that other people are saying and doing that is bothersome in our lives. And many times it's because they don't know, because we've not been vulnerable, we've not been authentic, we've not been transparent, we have not communicated with them. This is who I am, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and to build meaningful connection with those people because they have valuable information. And we don't need to assume that they know that automatically, whether the friendship has gone on for years or the relationship has gone on for a long time. Many times we have to tell people this is who we are and what we like and what we dislike so they can try to meet those needs, and we're more likely then to give ourselves away to them and build more meaningful relationships with them. You got to fight, this lack of genuineness and hiding and holding things back. You've really got to be willing to give yourself away and fighting ego and pride and comparisons and winning approval. Those things can be true about us if we're going to build meaningful connections and deeper relationships with people. That was tip number 5. Let me give you number 6. Influence people gently. Do not try to control them. Now, this is somewhere where I really struggle. Several years ago, I asked folks to point out, work with me and help me to identify the blind spots in my life. It's a great exercise. And I gave them 30 days to do it, and when we got back together, this group that had done this for me informed me of what my blind spots were. Now, I got to tell you, I had spent the whole month writing down what I thought my blind spots were. And I had made this whole list, thinking, man, I know myself well, and I've got all of these blind spots laid down. I'll never forget the day when I met with those men and they informed me of my blind spots. And I remember them sharing those blind spots with me, and I remember looking at my list, and I remember thinking, They're not on my list. I missed it. Maybe that's why they call them blind spots. One of those blind spots was, Jimmy, you tend to be a controlling person. Now, if I knew that, I wouldn't admit it. We want to influence. We want to relate to people gently and lovingly, and never in a sense of trying to control them in any ways. Controlling people, especially leaders, are so, so dangerous. When you and I have the privilege of making a difference in the lives of others, influence them, as it were, we really hold a very precious commodity in our hands. It's a treasure. And we need to be really careful to steward that treasure well. Have you ever thought about, it's a great question, when people talk about you when you're not with them, when people talk about you behind your back, and you know they do, what do they say? Do they say you're a gentle, considerate person or a control freak? What do they say? Let me give you some insight, because I know, because I am one, it's something that I fight against. Here are some signs that you might be a controlling person. Just a few, but let me read these. Here's one. People start apologizing prior to approaching you with a new idea. I mean, the first thing they do is, hey, I'm sorry to bother you, I'm sorry to interrupt. They start apologizing. That's a sure sign that, at least in their mind, you're a controlling person. Next, you don't really know how people feel about you, but you assume that they all approve of you. You're unaware. I mean, you don't know that you've missed it. There are some folks that don't approve of you. You just are unaware of that. Next, you assume you are always right. Controlling people, especially leaders. It's their way or the highway. Next, you enjoy keeping others with less information than you have. Knowledge and information are power, and power is control. And many times the controlling person, not many times, all the time, the controlling person is always withholding information because it thinks it gives them greater control. You think you need to be involved in making all the decisions. All the decisions. In fact, you probably think you ought to be the final word on every decision. I'm telling you, that is a controlling person. I mean, those are just some insights. And if you're going to build a meaningful relationship with someone, you've got to be willing to be gentle and considerate and authentic and transparent and never controlling. Tip number 7, strive, this is so important, strive to be a good and active listener. A good and active listener. You know, talk is easy and talk is cheap. Have you ever stopped to think? In James chapter 1, verse 19, James says, be slow to speak and quick to listen. Many of us practice the reverse. We are quick to speak and slow to listen. Have you ever stopped to think, God gave us one mouth and 2 ears. Some of us live like He gave us 2 mouths and 1 ear. We would be able to build more meaningful relationships if we would learn to be quiet, look people in the face and in the eyes, have genuine, authentic care and concern and compassion and interest in those individuals, and listen, and listen. And when they're talking to us, try to make sure that we're receptively listening to what they have to say, and then we're maybe even giving back to them with verbatim responses to know and understand what they're saying. See, you connect with people when people know that you are listening to them. Always, always be listening. You know, don't be the kind of person that's always interrupting, or the whole time somebody's chatting with you, you're crafting an answer without really listening to them. This is an important element in building meaningful relationships. Strive to be a good and active listener. Number 8, strive to not overreact to what I call the small stuff. Some of us are just too sensitive. We're just overly sensitive to everything and to everyone. We're too thin-skinned. And we feel like we've got to win every battle and we've got to make every decision. And I'm going to tell you, that's a relationship killer. We need to be the kind of folks that doesn't overreact to the small stuff. In fact, we overlook the small stuff. We're the kind of people, we're going to build meaningful relationships that make us worth following. And I love this term. We will aggressively forgive. Aggressively forgive people who offend us, especially in the small stuff. We will always be looking for opportunity to extend grace. And one of the main reasons we need to position ourselves to do that as a practice in extending grace and forgiveness to others, because the time is going to come, we're going to need to be on the receiving end ourselves for receiving grace and forgiveness. Number nine, recognize and reward people who get things done in the right way. I mean, over-appreciate people. I mean, do that if you can publicly. People need encouragement. They get beat down all the time by the world and the culture in which we live, and in many cases, even in their own homes. And we need to not be negative and not be critical, and we need to really try to add value, to encourage, and to over-appreciate people for who they are and what they do. Be looking for every opportunity to praise and to recognize friends and family and people who say things and who do things well. Thankful. Show gratitude to them. This will enable you and me to build more deeper relationships. And then number 10, cultivate deeper relationships with a few vital friends. Cultivate a few relationships. We need to try to deepen our connections and build deeper relationships with everybody we come in contact with. But we have to really be astute and really be deliberate and really handpicking, because we only have so much time. A handful of people, beyond our spouse and family, that we really build deep connections and relationships with, who become vital friends really for the rest of our lives. We're probably never going to have dozens and dozens of them. We simply don't have time to build those kind of relationships. But we all need to build those with a few people. These are the people that you can call at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, can I come over, or will you come over? I'm having a tough time. These are the kind of people that you can go to their home unannounced. These are the kind of people that you can go into their home and have refrigerator privileges. I mean, you don't have to ask, can I get something to drink or something to eat? You just open the refrigerator and take it and go for it. We all need those kind of friends into our lives. So before I close these 10 tips, so let me ask you this question. Something terrible happens in the middle of the morning. Other than family, who do you call? We need to build meaningful relationships with people. Now, this last section, in building meaningful relationships, this relational connection component, I want to close by looking at a sequence. How can you and I build a deeper connection with people? What can you and I do that will encourage people to allow us more entree into their lives so we can have greater impact and influence in their lives and be a leader worth following? And I think that it follows a sequence. And here is the sequence. People will not follow people that they do not trust. People will not trust someone that they don't connect with. And people cannot connect with someone who's not willing to show them their heart. So if we want people to follow us, if that's the end goal here, to be a leader worth following, to have credibility, and to be able to speak into the lives of others, then people have got to trust us. And in order for people to trust us, they have to connect with us. And if they're going to connect with us, we've got to be willing to be transparent and to show them our heart. So showing your heart leads to connection, leads to building of trust, and leads to the willingness to follow. Let me ask you this question. How do you best connect with people? Have you ever asked that question about yourself? You know, I did that to myself recently and said, you know, Jimmy, what is it about you that enables you to connect with people? And here are those critical elements that I thought. I connect with people with humor, sarcasm. I connect with people with confidence. I connect with people because I'm an encourager and a challenger and a motivator. I connect with people because I'm simple. I'm simple-minded. I can take that which is complex and break it down to that which is simple. What is it about you when it comes to relationships that are your greatest strengths that enable you to connect with others? Identify with those and work at them. Use them because it will enable you to build deeper relationship and deeper connections with others. All of this requires vulnerability. I know that. And I know that's harder for some of us than others. I want to read to you a quote from C.S. Lewis, a great author of the past. But I think he's got a word to say to us here about authenticity and transparency and vulnerability, and which really opens the door to enable us to connect with people in a more meaningful way. These are powerful words, so listen to them. Lewis writes this: "There is no safe investment. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping your heart intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even to an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries, avoiding all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or in the coffin of your own selfishness. But in that casket, where it's safe and dark and motionless and airless, your heart will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, and irredeemable. The alternative to tragedy, or at least to the risk of tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside heaven where you can be perfectly safe from all dangers and perturbations of love is hell." Folks, we've got to connect with people. God made us for relationships, and we must learn how to build more meaningful relationships if we want to be a leader worth following. I want to close by going to a very familiar passage in 1 Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13. This is a really, really important chapter, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. We're all familiar with it, but I want to read verses 4 to 7. And verses 4 to 7 are 15 characteristics of love, which is fundamental to building connections and meaningful relationships with anyone. I think 8 are positive and 7 are negative, but let me read. This is familiar terms, but let me read it. Paul writes these words: "Love is patient. Love is kind and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own. It is not provoked. It does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things." That's a powerful passage, isn't it? Here's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about those few verses and those 15 characteristics. And I want you to go into the text, but wherever love is referred to, either directly as love or in a pronoun it, instead of using the word love or the pronoun it, here's what I want you to do. Insert your name. Insert your name as it relates to Paul's description of love and building loving relationships. Which of those 15 characteristics, some positive and some negative, need work in your life? Identify those and go to work on those. Relationships. Relationships is what leadership is all about. Leadership is about relationships and results, but it's first and foremost about relationships. So if you and I are going to be leaders worth following, yes, we have to be men and women of authentic character. That is the core and the foundation. Yes, we must be someone who is exceptionally competent. We know what we can do and we get things done. But lastly, and more importantly, because if there are no followers, there's no leadership. And that requires building meaningful relational connections with people, where people will not follow you because they have to, but they will follow you because they want to. Thanks for watching. I'll see you the next session.